things I've struggled with in my entire life is religion and really just trying to actually believe in one individual religion in general. And it's always kind of been that way to me. Like, I've always kind of been a out of the box thinker and always thought that there probably is some sort of higher being out there, being that the fact of human existence and us being the only ones in the universe, it would be a one in like trillion or zillion or something like that chance, you know? So it's kind of hard for me to be like, oh, there's no higher power. There's nothing out there that could have created the world. There's nothing like that at all. But it's always been hard for me to pinpoint a religion to follow. And a big reason for that is because of how I grew up. So I grew up in a very like Christian household to start out with. I went to church from basically the time I was probably one all the way up to about the time I think I was like 7 or 8 years old. I went to church with my dad. And the entire time I went to church, I was taught to be a out of the box thinker. That's how my dad has always taught me to be. He always taught me to make sure that I can think for myself. And so the entire time I would be going to church, I never really thought, wow, this is a amazing thing. I'm blessed. I'm lucky. I'm any of these things, right? I never really thought about it in this way. It was just a thing that I would do. I would do it because my dad liked it, and I wanted to be there to support my dad. And same thing when I went to church later on, I would go because like my aunt liked going, or my uncle, or my grandparents, or something of that sort, basically. But I never went under the pretense that I was like, yes, let me go uh, and worship or anything of that sort, basically. And I think that's something that kind of shaped who I am a little bit, and then also seeing the same people who I went to church with all of the time stop going as well. You know, I've never really sat down and talked to them about why they stopped going. You know, like my dad, for example, he stopped going after a long time. After, I mean, from what I felt like to me, like was kind of his life, he stopped going. I never really asked him why, but I think that also kind of shaped that vision that it was hard for me to follow a singular religion. And this isn't saying Christianity or any religion in particular. I'm not saying that at all. I don't know all the religions. I don't know everything there is to know. I'm not going to claim to be some sort of saint that, you know, has all the world knowledge. But just from an outsider's perspective, from what I've kind of learned, especially through Christianity, because that's the one that I've been the closest to, is it would be really hard for me to figure out how or why I would follow Christianity. Not saying that God isn't real or anything of that sort, but it's more so how can you follow a religion if you don't actually practice the religion? How can you follow the religion if your heart is filled with greed, if your heart is filled with hatred, if your heart is filled with lust, pride, and everything else, right? And people will say, "Oh, well, that's the purpose. That's why you go to get rid of those things, right?" But I can't comprehend how I would get rid of them. If I am already struggling with getting rid of them as it is on my own, how would taking that step help me get rid of it? Or how many times would I continue to sin in any religion over and over again until I figured it out, essentially? And I think that's one of the biggest struggles that I have is I maybe I'm not going out and doing heinous acts on people, but I sin in basically micro ways in every single day, almost every single scenario. You know, like I said, I'm very prideful at heart. I'm very prideful of uh, who I'm becoming, who I've started to develop into. I do have a slight greed in my heart. You know, I do have that greed for uh for objects and things. And not everything. You know, I'm not like, man, I need a mansion or something like that. But it's like when I think about, let's say, money, for example, it's like, yes, I'm a little greedy towards it. Or like lust. I think that that's a big one that a lot of, especially young people deal with in general, is lust. Is how do you get past just lusting over anything and everything. I hear stories all the time where people are like, yeah, I basically just pray to God that he'll give me stuff. And I can't understand how that works, you know? Just physically in my brain, I can't understand how that works because that, from my understanding, that's not prayer. That's not actually speaking to God or whoever it is that you worship. It's not actually speaking to them if you're always demanding things, right? If you're always, God, please give me money. God, please give me a relationship. God, please give me this. God, please give me that. God, please do me that. It's always just such a weird thing to me that it's very hard, that it basically makes it very hard to understand how I would pray without it seeming almost like I'm demanding something. How would I worship without sin? How would I go about basically day to day life cutting every single thing out that I've known for years? And I think that's one of the hardest things is believing in a higher power, but not being able to comprehend a single religion or a single following, because in general it's just something very very difficult to to comprehend, I guess. You know, I actually talked to my friend about this, who is very Christian, literally today, as I making this video today, and he kind of, you know, he was, we talked about some of the stuff I talked about, and it kind of almost reassured my thoughts, kind of, you know, because one of the things he talked about was like, you know, you kind of pray for forgiveness or you know, repent essentially, but when you repent, repenting is supposed to be, you are acknowledging that you are doing something and you are trying to become a better person and be, and basically just get rid of that sin completely. So when it comes down to it, how do you do that without it seeming like a demand? You know, and like I said, this isn't just Christianity or Buddhism or any other religion in the world. You know, I, like I said, not a genius when it comes to this stuff. It's just something I think about a lot. It's one of those thoughts that I, you know, I'll sit alone at night and I think about, you know, how many times have I thought about, what if I just prayed? What if I just converted to this faith? I wonder how it would change my life significantly. But I also wonder, could I do it? Could I get rid of my inner pride? Could I get rid of my inner lust? Could I get rid of my inner, like my basic inner almost instincts that I've grown with through my entire life, and kind of become more humble? And I think it's just hard. It really really is. And yeah, I don't really know how else to explain it. At the end of the day, I think everybody should follow the basic things of religion, whether you're religious or not. I like, you know, treat others the way you kind of want to be treated. Love everybody equally, outside of like if they're despicable, essentially. But you know, no reason to just go around being rude. I think basic stuff like that is just like basic human decency. But there's just some aspects that I find very difficult. You know, like well, at what part are you demanding? At what part is it kind of something you don't want to follow? At what part is it you don't actually care? But yeah, that's all I want to talk about today. If you guys have any advice or anything like that, you know, feel free to leave it in the comments. It'd be really nice to like have in general advice for like anybody who kind of struggles with the same thing, because I think a lot of people do. I genuinely do. I think that a lot of people who believe in a higher power kind of struggle with that same thing, where they can't comprehend how to go about even touching a religion without it just being them demanding or them wanting or them continuing to do the things they're not supposed to do. Thank you guys for watching and have a wonderful night. Peace.